One of my first questions, and I ask this a lot, just from jiu-jitsu, traditional jiu-jitsu, modern jiu-jitsu, BJJ, I see you did it backwards. Most people get a black belt in traditional jiu-jitsu or some old school style.
Yes.
Find Gracie jiu-jitsu or Brazilian jiu-jitsu and then almost wash your hands with that and just stick to BJJ.
Yeah, come on a little bit. So this is a really good start, but what is the question?
What made you go from starting with BJJ Gracie Jiu-Jitsu early, and then opening your book later on after getting a black belt to other styles of Jiu-Jitsu?
Yeah, that's a good question. So thank you for that. I started Taekwondo, Muay Kwan, so I was always into it, and I wrestled, and I just when I saw the Gracies and the UFC, I said that's it. That makes the most sense to do the grappling and the ground fighting. So I just wanted to learn how to throw someone. I always wanted to learn judo when I was a little kid, and Taekwondo was a start, and that gave me some basic understanding with distance, and being like a little teenage kid. And then the Gracies, I saw hoists and stuff. Fell in love with Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. It was very practical. The self-defense, the sparring, everything was a lot different at the time. This is like the mid-90s. Now, today, it's like more sportive. But when I started Jiu-Jitsu, wasn't like, we didn't even know what the sport was. We got introduced to that like maybe a year later. So we were just learning how to do the fight. I got a good understanding about how to defend myself, and wrestling was more effective with the BJJ and the Jiu-Jitsu. Sometimes we'd have some judokas come in, and I didn't understand how it worked, and nor did I want to train at that time. I thought it would be more damage on my body. I thought it was easier just to do the ground. And of course, I was always interested in the Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. I had magazines and subscriptions to different publications, and there's just so many styles of Jiu-Jitsu, right? And systems that were created by different generations, and I just saw like a lot of movements. But when you're practicing Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, you're like, that wouldn't work. Even just looking at it, it's like too many moves. But when you look at the different styles of Jiu-Jitsu, now that in a very broad stroke, I think Jiu-Jitsu systems are Judo is a Jiu-Jitsu system, Aikido is a Jiu-Jitsu system, certain aspects of Hapkido are a Jiu-Jitsu system, and of course the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is a Jiu-Jitsu system, and a lot of people can say it comes from Judo. But it's to me, the umbrella is Jiu-Jitsu, and when you start to look at it with that type of lens in your eyes, you start to see the patterns of why things are a little bit different depending on where it was developed or where it was evolving. And my jump was the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and then I wanted to know all the wrist locks and the different twists and turns and controlling techniques and things like that for a police officer or something like that. And I made my direction towards the Yushishuni Jiu-Jitsu, and then the Yushishuni, you look at the background, goes everything almost starts from like an Aki Jiu-Jitsu, so it kind of filters down, and the Hakuryu. Then Hakuryu was Yushishuni. Then I learned the subset of Yushishuni, which is the Yushishuni combat system, which I got the black belt in. So this is me working backwards. Then I wanted to look at the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu self-defense techniques and figure out how to make better throws on the techniques. So understanding the principles of a throw is like the kasushi, the off-balancing. I wanted to make it effortless. Instead of like the understanding of distance, the clinching is Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. The clinching is the BJJ, the Jiu-Jitsu from Brazil. When you start taking the distance away, now you're like at a judo distance. Then you move it a little bit further, now you're at a different type of, how would you put this in like a wrist lock or arm control? So in understanding different types of distances, you're going to understand where all these different systems kind of fit. So that's how I kind of worked backwards. But now my dedication is the judo now. I got recently the brown belt, and it was really, how do I learn the 40 classic throws? How can I use those principles, the kasushi, the sekuri, and the gake, in the self-defense context so that those throws can be more effective? And then I just kind of fell in love with the gripping and the whole thing of judo, and just seeing how limited the different styles that you practice. And now you're learning different takedowns and things like that, mixing it with the wrestling. Then you're playing with the rule sets, like, the rules are hard, you can't do this, you can't do that, but then it's okay, let me use that as a discipline to really make me learn the next technique or something that these masters were going towards. And then, now with being in the military, I have a whole different appreciation for what I've been doing and what people are asking for.
So I've seen a reform in martial arts. Obviously, from the from feudal days of Japan to weapons and modern fighting to then in the 90s the biggest reform when the Gracies came to America and UFC started, and that's kind of taken us so far. What would you say is going to be the next big major reform in not only jiu-jitsu but just martial arts period?
Well, that's a really difficult question because in the 80s we always had the crazes like ninjutsu, and when I started Gracie Jiu-Jitsu I remember going to a supply store and the guy said that's not going to last, there's no history, the Gracies have no history, it's a trend, it'll just die out just like ninjutsu. I was like, man, you better start training this stuff because it's going to be around for a long time. It's connected to the UFC, it's connected to real fighting, there's more events every single day, and the Gracies do have a great history and it goes all the way back to connections to judo and all the sources of jiu-jitsu. And the guy just laughed at me. I was like a 16-year-old kid, snot-nosed kid. I believe his business was out. He's out of business, the supply store. But I had a lot of experience every day. Like I could feel what was coming, and I feel like in my journey I've been through a lot of I always see the next thing coming. Like it was like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, then cross training. Someone put it together, and stuff happened really fast. And then I just kind of went through it. Then it was all the sportive changes from specific jiu-jitsu positions to different types of guard passing and just different trends within the sport of BJJ. I feel like when you look at the statistics that martial arts training is actually going on a downtrend. I think it was at its height when there was the UFC went to mainstream, United States and around the world. It was everyone was training again, and the numbers show that there were a lot of schools in karate and all the different things. Now we're like kind of low, but to look at what I feel what's needed, I would hope that like the law enforcement communities would train more. The military is training more with their refinements when you said like the post-Gracie Jiu-Jitsu area, because the military was exposed with the Horion, Gracie, and how that program kind of went to the different branches of the military. We trained it. The Army Combatives is really strong jiu-jitsu. The Air Force Combatives really strong. Like the base of that program is heavily the jiu-jitsu from Brazil. And I hope that the law enforcement agencies can learn how to do these as a techniques, not just to learn like only jiu-jitsu, but at least the arresting techniques. And then that gets you into like the classic Taiho Jutsu techniques, arresting technique.
So when I was in the Army, obviously we didn't have MAC-P, Modern Army Combatives program yet, but it was more or less grappling, wrestling, and every post, every unit, whoever the tough guy in the unit was kind of taught the system. And even now, you see police officers and like you said, law enforcement adopting jiu-jitsu. Should there be a standard military law enforcement only type of curriculum, or should it just be, hey, we're going to adopt the local jiu-jitsu instructor is going to come teach us the same techniques that he's teaching Joe on the street? Or should there be two different?
That's a yes and no type of question for me to answer it. I feel that everybody should train something, and whatever that is, because if you're training, your fitness level is going to go up, and you need fitness for your job. If you're in the Air Force and the Army, Marines, and of course law enforcement agencies, people need to be in shape, especially for what they do. When you have to arrest someone, you have to be in shape. You have to be, not out of shape and get beat to the punch or the kick or the grapple. And it's in the past how it was taught. Everything in the military, I feel, started with the Air Force, going out, bringing the techniques post World War II, all the techniques from Japan. The judo team in the 50s was phenomenal for judo in the Air Force. But what they did was they made tough judokas. They're like, we're going to make it tough guys. And when you only want that, it doesn't benefit the airman, the overall airman. It doesn't make a better airman. It just makes a tough judoka in uniform. The Army has done the same thing. They have done the modern Army Combatives. They have had competitions to see, have fight contests to show the techniques work. But what they really did was they created a bunch of units of like people that were the tough guys, and that's not good, because over time, if you create a tough person and you have that as your approach, people get hurt. People don't want to endorse that, although it does make the strong survive. The Marines the same way. The Air Force is a little bit different. They want to make better airmen, and they have the Air Force Academy has the Air Force Combatives, and the injury rate versus basketball, intramural basketball. There's more injuries in intramural basketball than there is in combatives. And it's really just teaching people that have never been in a fight, never been punched in the face, just what they would feel like under pressure. And then they're learning the techniques. So if you're going to teach the military, yes, they need to know this stuff. Even if if you're wearing a uniform for more than 8 hours a day, and you're going off base and going to the store, you see an altercation, and you're in uniform, you don't have a secondary weapon, what do you think you have to do? You're in uniform, you have to do something. And you can't be in a fist fight with someone. You need to be able to control that person and put their arm behind their back. When you know that type of knowledge, that's basic combatives, and that's basic Taiho Jutsu. That's basic arresting technique. So that's almost two different types of skill sets. You need to know one of them, at least. And you're in uniform. You don't have a secondary weapon. So your hands and your arms and your body is the weapon. Every military person should be able to do that. Every law enforcement person should be able to do that, in uniform or without, and not relying on secondary and third weapons. You got to be able to literally take someone down and put their arm behind their back, or have the presence of mind to be able to do that. So you need fitness, you need technique. Now, the latter part of your question, should it all be like one thing? I don't think so, because there's different types of thinking, there's different departments, people do things in different areas. But there should be at least a core techniques of what is the modern, what's working today, what has worked in the past, and what works today.
So one thing, and again, this is off my military experience, when I was at Fort Drum, we learned Hapkido from a civilian who really knowledgeable, really good. Taught Hapkido, had a school off post, and taught at Light Fighters Academy. Right. Well, halfway through my service at Fort Drum, they did a big change. They drew a line in the sand, and civilians were no longer allowed to teach the military. They were having some issues, and it came to the question of, am I a soldier? Am I going to take seriously the combat skills taught to me by someone who hasn't even been in combat or hasn't even served in the uniform?
Right.
So, and that's always been a big debate in military-style combatives and law enforcement. Should the teacher be active duty or a combat veteran versus just someone who knows the technique?
Yeah, I agree in a certain respect with what they're saying. Before joining the military, I was asked to go to the Marines in Camp Pendleton, and I was brought in as a specialist. So it was a special day. I wasn't the lead of the program. I wasn't supposed to go in there and teach exactly to the book, because you're in the Marines or you're in the military. You have to do just like the book. Because we're trying to teach to a lot of people, and you can't veer off that teaching methodology. And I understood that going in, and I was brought in as a specialist. So back to your Hapkido instructor off base, all of you were probably learned what he or she was good at. Follow me? And that's what happened with me with the Marines. I was taught what I was good at. Now, the good thing about what I came in doing was stuff they already were doing. Like, they just asked me, here's where our curriculum is, and there were certain jiu-jitsu positions. How do you think, what would you do? And I just showed some details that I feel are overlooked or would make more effective, and they were really influential at that time. And then I went off and joined the military, and I went and started with the modern Army combatives, and was taught in such a way. Then I went from the Army combatives, then I was employed to the Air Force Academy to do Air Force combatives program. So I had what the Marines were doing, what the Army were doing, and now what the Air Force is doing, but I haven't hung out with the Navy yet. I don't even know what their program is, but I started to get the trend of the different systems. And of course, the Marines have much more content in their curriculum. They have the knives and different weaponry, the punching, the kicking combatives, and then of course the grappling jujutsu combatives. So at that day with the Marines, I did my specialties. When I went to the Army, modern Army combatives, I learned their whole program in one class. The instructor was like, you know all this. Here are our drills. And the same thing was with the Air Force. Within like an hour, I could look at the curriculum and I say, I know all this stuff. And that's not me just being egotistic. It's just I've got a 25-year start versus the guy that says, oh my God, you do martial arts. They had 0. I had 25 years. And heavily based on all these programs is the jiu-jitsu.
So with that said, how, not someone that's done martial arts their whole life, Joe just joined the military, never fought except for a couple of street fights or high school fights. Gets in the military, starts learning military combatives or jiu-jitsu system. How detailed or in-depth should a realistic, reality-based combatives program, how in-depth should that curriculum be?
The depth of the program should be enough to get people introduced to the different skill sets. So you have level 1, level 2, level 3, right? What I mean by that is, at the end of the basic program, the person, the recruit, the military personnel, they should be inspired to learn more jiu-jitsu. They should be inspired to learn more boxing. They should be inspired to learn more kickboxing. They should be inspired to understand the knife, the gun retention if they're more in the security forces or a military police. They should have some type of inspiration and the basic entry level that they get. And then level 2, you go a little bit further. But there should not be a mastery within combatives programs. If you want mastery, you have to pursue how to teach. You need to pursue each respective discipline, which would take your whole life, just to do one. So the idea is, again, fitness levels, so your PT scores go up. You have self-preservation. You can protect yourself if something happened. And then if you have to step in to help someone else, you have at least some skill sets to do that. Because that's my biggest argument for anything. Why do you train so much martial arts? Like, look, I'm not trying to be the best fighter in the world. I just want to be able to defend myself or someone else, my family or someone I don't know. And when you're in uniform and you're protecting your family or someone you don't know, you have to behave a certain way. That's just the way it is. I was coming out of a tailor for my uniform, and while I was in there was an argument between a man and a woman. And I looked at the establishment owner. I'm like, man, it's kind of crazy right now. But in my mind, I'm thinking, what am I going to do if this guy starts punching this girl? I have in my mind going through what I would do as a civilian. I said, man, beat this guy up. But I'm in uniform. I can't just beat this guy up. I have to be able to control this guy with my words, my presence, and just kind of have logic. I would do the same thing without a uniform, but if I had to, I would have to, the presentation of how to defend myself would have to be different in the eyes of the public because I'm in uniform.
So when we talk about training and how in depth or how not in depth that you should train, I remember going to a Kyle Terra seminar. And Kyle Terra, sport jiu-jitsu, 10-time, absolute champion. And one of the black belts at the seminar asked him a question. And he said, Kyle, you compete all the time, you train all the time. He's like, what does training, when you get ready for a tournament, what does your training look like? And Kyle's answer, without even thinking about it, he said, I train to be happy. He's like, if drilling makes me happy, I drill. If sparring makes you happy, you should spar. If running makes you, he's like, if you're happy, you're going to train better. So, and it reached a lot of people, but I want to ask you, because me, I'm a drink coffee, drink energy drink, go balls to the wall, spar as hard as I can, that's training. Yeah. And I know other people are more relaxed, slow and smooth, let's drill, let's work it out. What is in your opinion, the happy medium? Should there be a lot of sparring and minimum drilling, more drilling and minimum enduring?
That question is going to be different, whatever world champion has their specialty, what they're good at. And if you're going to go into any game, you need to know the rules and be the best within the rules and be able to learn how to bend the rules the best. So Kyle Terra, in his history in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu sport, he's been effective at his weight category and sometimes outside of his weight category to implement his expertise, his levels of knowledge, and putting people in positions of ignorance. That's universal for anybody in martial arts. If you can do that, work the things that you're the best at in the world, or at least if you believe that you are, and you drill those moves, being happy or not, you still got to do the drilling. If you want to be a world champion, you got to have the without thinking, and the endurance that goes with it, and then the experience also. You don't just arrive to be a 10-time world champion. You need to progress to that. There's different mindsets, and then you're talking about someone that can compete in other sports of grappling and be successful. So what you got to ask that part of the person, what have they done? And I think their answer is going to be pretty much in line with what I just said. They're going to understand the rules, how to be the best within the rules, how to bend the rules, have the mindset, everything, the diet, and the becoming a champion before you have holding the medal. And I have been in the sport of judo. I've been really focusing on the approach to certain things. Having the confidence before you even grip, knowing your throw before you even grip, and that's a different mindset than a BJJ representative. Like Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, the majority do not think like that. They just want to get the fight to the ground the best way that they can, and win from the bottom or win from the top or somewhere in between. It's not walking on the mat already knowing your approach, knowing what you're going to do before 1, 2, 3, how to understand the zero, which is a concept in mathematics, but made famous by, I would think today, with Dr. Roddy Ferguson, is can you, like a chess player, set the tempo? Can you be first? Can you beat the person to 1 by understanding the 0? So not to get too philosophical, but that is a very major component of competition, is pace, being ahead of the person.
So I think about competition, and then obviously you have sport jiu-jitsu, which is just grappling. You move up to like maybe MMA, which is grappling, punching, and it's a wide range. And I remember hearing Riley Bodycombs, a Sambo fighter, and he was using an example that him and a jiu-jitsu guy, Ryan Hall, made up. And they call it the Coliseum theory. And they say, Coliseum, it's a spectator sport, but the two guys in there are literally, they could be fighting for their life at the time. Right. And no matter what the sport is or what the crowd pleaser is, when you actually get into the Coliseum, it's just mono a mono. They use the example, they shed off all the flashy moves and all the stuff maybe they learned or saw or liked, and just stuck to exactly what they could do to win. And he was using that, for example, for heel hooks and leg locks and that trend. So throughout your experience with your wide range of different jiu-jitsu schools and putting it together in your own concepts, what would you say? I mean, is it a large amount of every different style of having to shed off to get to that Coliseum theory, or?
I just hearing the Coliseum theory from how you described it, I get it. I mean, if I can expand on what I think the definition is, look, here's the thing. When I started doing jiu-jitsu when I was a teenager, my body moved a certain way. Now I'm 40 years old. So I've had an arc of jiu-jitsu training and different approaches, different high-level instructors, application, what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, taking information that I enjoy at a moment and then discarding it because it's no longer fun, the Kara reference, but or it doesn't trend as much, to something that you're going to be, what I learned from day one, and now I still apply it now. So if you can if you can shed all of the techniques that's not going to be effective in the basics or the fundamentals, that's what you're going to be using from day one all the way to your, the arc of whenever you're going to stop. And of course, you don't want to stop training, but if you're going to be using it, you're going to change. Everything is, to me, first and foremost, how effective you are in a self-defense, because that's what you go in out of shape, go in the gym. It's like, okay, man, try to beat me. And if you can stop the best guy in the room from beating you, that's a victory. It just is. That's a victory if you're 16 years old. That's a victory if you're 40. That's a victory if you're 80. Just defend yourself. And when you think of military combatives, it's just, survive, or not trying to submit this guy, but just trying to buy time so somebody else in the army, in a war context, can come up and put a gun to the guy's head. I was able to survive, draw some time to get some backups to put a gun to his head. That's how you have to think in combatives. It's different than a game. It's not a game. It's survival. And that's a different type of training, right? And we have to do something. I've always played this, like, what is the definition of a sport, martial art? What's the definition of a modern martial art versus combat? And this kind of circles back to the question of learning something from a civilian that's never been in combat. The military doesn't want to have that person as a lead because they've never been shot at. They don't know what it's like to smell the gunpowder or have that brass at the back of their neck and burn them. They just don't know that. You've been a combat veteran. I don't know what it's like to be in Afghanistan, so I can, you have to acknowledge that. And that's why I feel that the military, now to answer your original question, or law enforcement, they need to have their own thing. They just do. Where it's different to wear the uniform than in civilian. There's a different set of laws that have to be followed when you're in uniform versus a civilian. And I feel that in a way that there should be something for the military. That's just the way it should be. And it's just not for civilians.
So this is kind of backtracking on one of the questions, but I'm gonna use us for an example. You know, I'm gonna leave here today. We train for maybe about 3 hours, and if I go home and talk to my wife or someone who doesn't do jujitsu, they just, third person, they say, hey, what'd you do with Professor Tony's today? And I say, hey, we learned, the rush it and we played with this grip. And to someone who doesn't really train jujitsu or understand it, they might, you spent 3 hours learning one move.
Yeah.
Okay, 5 variations of one move, and they don't get it. But to you and me and to other people, it's like, hey, that's enough for months or even a lifetime of so much different stuff.
Yeah.
So when you're teaching like a group, obviously you have a curriculum and you want the curriculum to be simple. But then with the group, how much do you stress or emphasize that one technique and that one technique variation before you just go to an entirely different?
Well, to teach a group class in teaching methodology, when I teach something, whatever it is, if it's a core technique or a flashy technique, something fun, something I want to experiment with, it doesn't matter. We move on to the next technique when I can see that the group is retaining a little bit of what, we've got to play within the time frame, what the goal is of the lesson based off the standards coming from the curriculum, etc. But if I see people are not getting it, I put all the blame on me. I didn't present the technique correctly. If I see a couple people not getting it, okay, those 2 people didn't, okay, I'll help them. But eventually everyone's showing the picture of what I want, there are no more questions, we move on. That's just it. Or you just go through the whole class and just work on one thing. That's all we did today. Now that's just part of repetition. But of course you want to get the person to be able to test it. It's like, here's the technique, you practice, you drill, okay, now let's add some resistance. And that's one thing that I liked about back in when I first started was a lot of the jiu-jitsu systems and even martial arts, they only did kata. Everything was prearranged and there wasn't a lot of resistance. But with the grace of jiu-jitsu, the randori that comes from judo, the freestyle sparring, I was able to really apply these techniques in real time and then add levels of striking and punching and put gear on. And I can only go so far. I'm not going to be like a cage fighter, but I was getting punched and I was getting, as I got better, I was getting punched less and less and less. I'm like, man, I can really use this stuff, and the stress is on. So I really feel like everything should be led to some type of testing. So in the event that you need to do it, your body, your mind, everything works as designed. When you have to put somebody on their face, it's not like you've never done that before.
So I have 3 Hapkido, I want to say mentors, or people I've trained with. One of them is Michael Rhodes. He's a black belt, and he was a retired U.S. Army Ranger. One of them's In Cyrus. He's a grandmaster in a different style of Hapkido, and he was actually an FBI special agent. And then one was Christopher Garland, civilian contractor attached with special operations. And all 3 of these guys, obviously, they're hands-on. They're in the field. They're in the live trenches, I guess. So any way combat or the combatives or the bad guys have evolved, they see it, they can incorporate that with their students. Hey, this is how people are attacking. Like, for example, in Cyrus, he pulled up the FBI statistics of assaults, said the 2 number 1 assaults were haymakers and double leg takedowns. Yeah. So then people quickly start training that. So as an instructor, you have your curriculum, you're teaching your students the curriculum. You visit a new school, maybe you go somewhere else and you see something that's not in the curriculum, but it seems like, hey, right now, this is something I've had an eye opener, I want to introduce this. Yeah. How soon after you learn it as an instructor, how do you start introducing that? Because you're still, per se, kind of learning it, or kind of understanding it yourself. How soon after you find the technique, decide that you want to show it to your students, how do you incorporate that to an already established?
Well, first you want to have a baseline with that person. I've never met them. I want to assess what they know. So I would say look at their curriculum, and if I can contribute to their curriculum, I would say, okay, let's pick a technique and then just see if they can apply it. And even if they I've done this a million times, well, let me see it, let me feel it. And then hopefully I can help them with that technique. And then if I can help them with that technique, there's a buy-in. I win their confidence. So I would want to work off their techniques, or show how some of my insights could help in that technique. Maybe that whatever they're talking about is only looked through the lens of a boxer or something, or some type of, you had to label it. Here's what the grappler would do. Here's what a judoka would do. Here's what a jiu-jitsu guy is thinking. You know what? I'm just trying to give my insight so I can get the buy-in. And then we can kind of freestyle a little bit and say, here's some things that we can think about. Here's what I've been working on. And then that's kind of like the best type of scenario in any, if you can get the different people working together, regardless of where they're from, what style they're from, what branch of the military they're from, and it's like, you're just freestyling. So that's the best type of training in jiu-jitsu. When you have different black belts, it's like kind of at the end of training, just kind of, hey, Vizina, it's like a hangout. Just, it's like the lesson after the lesson.
So you would say 100%, you know, it's good to, obviously it's good to continue to train. If you want to be good at self-defense and combatives, you should always train. But at the same time, maybe visiting other schools, training other instructors, or should you?
I feel that every relationship is different, you know. This is a good question for jiu-jitsu. Is like the idea of a Kranchi, someone that's going to change, like train on one team, then go train on another team, and then compete against. I don't know. I don't like the idea of like training a student and then the next day they're going to compete against my team. That's not right. But especially with the internet, information's all out there. It's like you want people to learn. So in a right way, I feel everyone should be able to learn techniques, explore techniques, reach out to other people, because you know it's not only about competition. You know, but it's I think it's just having a really honest relationship with the people that you work with and train with. It's like, look, I'm only going to be here for 2 months, and I'm going to be moving because you know I'm going to move to another state. I want to learn this from you. Can you help me get here? Yes or no? And they say yes, and then they give me the techniques. I learn the techniques, then I go off and I pursue my journey. If something happens along the lines, you know, like they're mad that I've learned the techniques, that's not right. They should have never shown me the techniques. But if I'm like, hey man, I'm on your team, I'm your flag, I'm gonna your flag, and then I learn the techniques, the next day I go to competition and compete against you, that's not right. So I think people should be more transparent on their behavior for learning knowledge, because it takes a long time to get things into your muscles, refine the techniques over years, teach the techniques, give it to someone else, and then they just like, they don't use it in the right way. People don't appreciate how long it took to have those refinements.
So you as an instructor, you know, you pulled from, you know, your other jiu-jitsu schools and your masters and your instructors, you put it together and you're giving it to your students. You know, here's what I have. I've kind of, you know, fine-tuned a nice program right here. Yeah. Now, is there, and this isn't the which martial arts the best, that's a debate for another day, but is there one standalone style? Is there one that someone can say, you know what, even if I have to learn 2 different schools under this style makes, I don't need to go to cross-train karate, I don't need to, you know, all the stand-up I have is here, all the grappling I have is here. Is there one style, or should there be one standalone style?
What, if you had a chance to practice all the styles, what you're going to take away are principles that connect to all of them or lead really closely to another. When you talk about masters, when you get a bunch of masters in a room, like I'm a master, but when I've been in rooms where there's masters and they all sound the same, what they're trying to talk about, what they're getting towards, it's the same thing, but it's just a little different, right? So the techniques are what they are. The principles, connecting to the techniques, those 2 things, that's where I find in different styles of jiu-jitsu, different ideas of striking arts, ideas of weaponry arts, you are either close or you're far. There's the in-between. You're on the inside or you're on the outside. You know, you're just understanding what your angles of attack are, your concept, and your theory. You know, the concept is I'm going to get the inside control. I'm going to block this guy from the inside control because the guy's standing this way. From here, I'm going to have a major advantage to control this. So that's my concept. I'm going to try to, here's my technique, how to grip the collar, how to turn my wrist like that. Like you get into the refinement technique. But the idea is there. The concept is there. Now, how I'm going to throw that guy is the theory. I'm going to off balance him, and in theory, it should work. And then you look back here, what's the principle here? What was I trying to do? Okay, what were some other principles that kind of put this together? Okay, I gotta have base. I gotta have a strong frame. I have to have a good pressure. I have to have a good base. And you can learn base from wrestling. You can learn base from judo. You can learn base from jiu-jitsu. You know, you got to test it. Okay, let me see your base in karate. Okay, good. Why is your base like this? You know, because I can feel it like this, like that. Because I can do this technique. I don't worry about the techniques. Your structure. So those are the things that you can kind of look at and have like almost like universal glasses on and lenses to be like, what are the masters of these systems? What were they going towards? Now they're passed away. What were they echoing? And I feel like a master of jiu-jitsu is trying to listen to what was before them. Years and years and years before. And then when you can start like hearing and appreciating what the message was, and then you're extending on that and you're doing something bigger to pass on to the next generation, that has more to do than just technique. That has more than anything about flags and competition. It's not about that. It's just about, this is some real stuff. Really, I know that it's working. Here's why it's working. And you just feel like you're doing less and less and less anyway. You're not doing more and more and more.
Okay. With that, and here's my final question. You're the master now. You know, masters, messages they want to echo generations on. If we drew a line in the sand right here today, and decades from now, 30, 40, maybe 50 years from now, jiu-jitsu guys who are coming up, maybe black belts, what would be a message if you had one now, today, from all your experience, all your revelations and everything? What would be the message you would want? What would little Tony Pacenski want his message to be for 5 or 6 generations in the future?
I just think that the way that people look at what they're practicing and trying to find the limitations as fast as possible, so that if you can find limitations of what you're doing, you're going to be inspired to find some answers, to expand on that, to empower yourself to kind of reach the limitation and be like, okay, how do I get past this so I can empower myself? One thing I learned, I did over 20 years of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and if you use the terminology of Japanese, the Niawaza, the ground fight, and it makes so much sense. It's like the technique is so good on the ground, so refined for a fight, for going against another person in a struggle, and the techniques and how to do the positions within positions. And then you say, look, we're going to change the rules today. We're not going to fight on the ground. You can only do stand up. You need to do tachiwaza, your throwing technique. You're like, well, I'm not good at that. Now, that could be the limitation of my training. That could be a limitation of the curriculum. It could be a limitation of the style. But that's a limitation, and I have to start learning. I got to learn that technique so that I can be more refined and knowledgeable. Not just so I can win a medal, but just so I can have my own confidence stepping onto this mat against anyone. If we're going to do stand-up techniques, we're going to have confidence before the grip, during the grip, on the ground, in the struggle, and that's the message I want to preach to the modern judoka or the modern jiu-jitsu guy, the modern karate aspect, like just being able to be eclectic in a way, start to master principles as soon as possible, find limitations as soon as possible, don't get injured, have a good positive mindset, pay attention to protocol, like how things are being taught in the respective school that you're going into. Don't be a tough guy, just be a pursuer of knowledge. These are all these ideas will help you. Because if you get injured, you're not going to train. You get a negative mindset because you're injured, you're not going to train. If you have a negative mindset while you're training, people aren't going to like you. They're not going to share information with you. You're not going to be the good guy on the mat. You're going to be egotistical. You're going to be the bully. This is typically what happens. And that will affect your training. And that's important. So that's my thing. Not just with gripping and stuff like that, but I want, like, I know where I'm at in the military. I want to do continue the combatives in whatever personnel is on the mat with me on that base at that time, and I want to follow the curriculum that we're doing. I hope that in the next several years I can personally contribute to that respected curriculum. If it's Air Force combatives, I want to make the techniques better. I want to build on it. Whatever they want me to do, I want to contribute. And then across the branches, if it's a law enforcement or a civilian on base that needs to learn some combatives, there are moments where we're having the lesson after the lesson, when we're sparring or whatever, and I want people to understand some of the Taiho Jutsu techniques, the arresting techniques, because that's really what we need to do. We need to learn how to use combatives in a way sometimes where we just have to control the position. And we got to, like, make somebody not get in an arm lock and break their arm or put them to sleep. We need to be like, hey man, just stop, you know? And sometimes, hey man, stop is putting pressure on them and having their arm behind their back, and you're not saying anything, but you're physically saying, hey man, calm down. And to learn how to do that, you need to know the Taiho Jutsu. You need to know the arresting techniques that are found in Jiu-Jitsu systems and in grappling systems all the way back to turn of the century, things like that. And that could be my major contribution to the military, I feel, in the next 15 years. It could be just the lesson after the lesson, really focusing on the Taiho Jutsu, and I want to go military arresting techniques. So it's essentially keep doing what you're doing. Your combatives in the Marines, combatives in the Army, combatives in the Air Force or the Navy, or whatever specialized department that you're in, even in law enforcement. But I'm going to be at this base, and we're going to be doing this training, and then after the lesson after the lesson is going to be the Gunshin Taiho Jutsu. And in that was based off of the big military book that I wrote when I got out of basic and went to my first tech school. I transitioned to tech school to my first duty station. There was a time there where it's like, you're at home. What are you going to do? You're going to train, you're going to play video games. And for me, I wanted to write something for the Air Force. This was before I started MACP. This was before I started Air Force Combatives. I didn't even know what was in the programs. But I was like, here's Jiu-Jitsu for combatives. Here's striking combatives. Here are some Taiho Jutsu techniques from the Japanese Jiu-Jitsus and the control. Here's where I'm going. Here's what I think. And then I did do some research online, like what were the security forces? Because my AFSC in the Air Force was in maintenance. And the security force guy's like, get out of here. You're not even in our job field. You're not supposed to know this. I'm like, yeah, but I'm 25 years ahead of you in what you're doing. So people that knew who I was, they would meet me off the base and we'd train jiu-jitsu. So I was like, okay, this is what they're doing. Here's what I think is good. Here's where it can contribute. And I just wrote the book. And it's very hard to get things done in the military. It's not going to go over. So I was like, let me just structure this again. I restructured it into what would be the military arrest techniques, Gunshin Taiho Jutsu, and essentially what it is, it's about 9 curriculums, and I can pass the student the card and say, here, I need you to learn this, everything that you got, starting from 0, or you've done level 1, level 2, level 3 combatives. Some of the things that you're going to go on these different cards that are in colors, you already know, or you practice. Here's some other things that you need to know, and then we can start branching into the arresting techniques. So you finish one card, you get 1 rank. You finish the next card, you get assessed, you get the next rank. So it's like yellow, orange, green, brown, 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 black, 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 black. So the idea is to get students to become instructors level 1, basic instructor. Level 2, senior instructor. Level 3, master instructor. That's it. Just like your level 1, 2, and 3 in the military combatives. Instructors are basic, senior, or master. And then there's like the heads of the programs, the guys that are directors. So that's it. And then if someone gets a black belt like yourself today, you have a black belt in a Gunshin Taiho Jutsu, level 1, You know, you're a combat veteran, you're a veteran, you can teach this to the military in a veteran's capacity. If law enforcement came to you, it's like you have a specialized knowledge coming from your military background, coming from your martial arts background. And from me, you know, I've passed this knowledge on to you up until this skill set. But you still have some levels to go, senior and then master. And you know, if you get the 4 stripes, then you're part of the board. And I really would like to see contributors to the system. And you know, it's not for everyone. It should be. Every civilian should know these ideas in jiu-jitsu if they're passionate about jiu-jitsu. But if you're in uniform, you have to be in a different. You have to have different skill sets, more than just your basic combatives, or more than just your basic jiu-jitsu. You need to have these techniques of Gunshin, Taiho Jutsu. All right, does that make sense?
It does.
I mean, that's what I really feel. So now it's, what can I do? Where has Taiho Jiu-Jitsu been in the last 45 years, 50 years? Where can it be advanced? How can it be pushed forward? So that's what I'm going to say to every Taiho Jiu-Jitsu master, instructor that I meet in Europe or in Japan or in the States or in Brazil or wherever I'm at. If it's through the online or through a telephone conversations, okay, just look, I'm going to do this regardless. I want to help with what you're doing. Maybe you can help what we're doing. And for me, my context is within the military. Because if it's outside the military, then it's just Taiho Jutsu. But if it's within the military and it's like it has my stamp on it, it's Gunshin, military style. And I'm doing that specifically because it's for us. The ranking system is the structure, but the rank at the end of the day is this person was ranked within a military structure and a martial arts structure, not one or the other. So if you get ranked in the military structure, I'll give you a nice handshake and a coin, you know, or maybe a certificate and a label, and you know you have a curriculum and you're going to teach, so you got their certificate. But you're martial arts, so you get a rank. So you get both together, voila. But then there's no like coral bell, there's no master rank. There's no Soki, there's nothing like that. It's just level 1, 2, and 3. Black belt 1, black belt 2, black belt 3. Make sense?
It does. It does.
All right. Good.